one thing led to another. They both, got drunk and punched on, and my son stabbed his father.
So that short clip was Kelly. She's one of our two guests today, the other one being Tia. Both are from Australia, and they administer a group called Drug Addiction Family Support Australia. Now, right from the very beginning, supporting the loved ones of people who suffer an addiction has been kind of a core fundamental for us at the Ashes to Awesome for all sorts of different reasons. And we get into this episode as to why that has been such a big focus for us. I think it's really important that we support the loved ones of people. And I think that's the best way that we have at Ashes to Awesome to ultimately support the people that are suffering an addiction. Anyway, listen, the title sponsor for today's episode is the Yatra Trauma Centre. They're located in Krabi, Thailand, here where I reside. And for any of you that are new to the platform, that's where I started my healing journey when I came to Thailand. I was fortunate enough to experience their residential treatment program. They treat trauma, all sorts of trauma. Quite often that means treating addiction through the lens of trauma. And for me, that was very much the case. Completely changed my life. They offer a variety of different therapies, a whole bunch of different activities throughout your stay there that all lend itself to that trauma-informed therapy that you're getting. Absolutely amazing. Completely changed my life. So if you'd like to know more about them, you can visit our website at a2apodcast.com/trauma. And there you'll find a whole bunch of episodes that my co-host for this episode, Mike Miller, has guested on, and learn more about them, get their contact info as well. So I hope you enjoyed the episode, and thanks for supporting. Hello, everybody. Watchers, listeners, supporters of all kinds. Welcome to another episode of the Ashes to Awesome podcast. I'm your host, Chuck LaFlange, checking in from Krabi, Thailand. My co-host for tonight is my good friend and all sorts of different titles, Mike Miller, who's also in Krabi, Thailand. It's a very rare thing to happen on the show. So how you doing today, Mike?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Good.
Happy to be here.
Before we get into introducing our two guests that are on with us today, Mike, could I get you just to do the typical 60 to 90 second about who you are and what you're doing out here in Krabi?
Do my best to keep it that short. I own and operate, founder, clinical director of Yatra Trauma Treatment Centre, where we treat all kinds of presentations of trauma, including substance use disorders, and we treat that through treating the lens of trauma. In personal recovery, been clean for over 21 years, and that's me, basically.
Wow, that was a condensed version. I'm impressed. There's so much more to Mike than that, but
I've been practicing.
That was great. That's great. And of course, our two guests are both in Australia. So again, people that share sunlight and dark with us, which is another rare thing to happen for me, as most of our guests are on the other side of the world. First up, we have Kelly. How are you doing today, Kelly?
Good, thanks. So, I'm here from Australia and started the Family Addiction Support Group, and with the help of Tia. Thank you, Tia. I have never had an addiction. I've just watched my son ride the roller coaster of addiction and being there to support him the whole way, and still supporting him while he's in prison, but currently on the Suboxone program. So,
yeah. We'll talk more about that. But before we get into all of that, I'd like to introduce our second guest, Tia, who is also in Australia. How are you doing today, Tia?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, down under, mate. So my name is Tia. I am an admin on the Drug Family Addiction Support Group Australia. I was in addiction for 28 plus years, 6 years off the hard drugs now, 2 years off alcohol and cannabis. And I'm able to shed a bit of light and insight to the family members on Kelly's group about what, is inside kind of the addict's mind from my own perspective and experience. I also have a son that's entrapped in addictions. That brings that into light. I also do support work for the Australian Anti-Ice campaign, and we run educational workshops and a buddy peer mentorship program to help those that are still suffering.
Okay, great. It's funny, of course, I'm not the parent or I'm the cousin of a couple of people who suffer an addiction, or have suffered an addiction. We've lost 2 of 3 of those right now. But the same thing you said, Tia, I found that I was able to connect with family members almost better than I think sometimes than other people that are in recovery or in active addiction. And I think for the same reasons that same way that you're talking about, just to offer some kind of insight from this side of it and what that's like, right? And I found that early on in my content creation kind of journey. So for some of the same reasons. So with that said, for anybody that's new to the platform, and I guess you guys coming from Australia, we will have some new listeners. I'm Chuck for the sake of the show. Chris in real life, you can call me whatever you want. 20 some odd years in active addiction, coming up on 2 years, 21st of this month that I've been sober. Yeah, so I'm a podcast host now and living in Krabi, Thailand. I actually came out here to experience the Yatra Centre with Mike and what they do there, their residential treatment program. And that treating the trauma really changed my life. So, and I've been here for a year on the 31st of this month. So, yeah.
Beautiful.
Anyway, who wants to go first? Who do we got here? We'll go in the same order. We'll start with you, Kelly. So, Kelly, you mentioned that your son's in prison.
Yeah.
One of the first things that comes to my mind when you say that is that a relief? I'm going to let you kind of talk more about your story, obviously, right? But whenever I hear a parent say that their child is in prison, I think, but because of the lifestyle that can kind of come along sometimes. Sometimes it's
I think
a break, right? So, yeah.
I think this might be his last time, hopefully, from, what he said to me and stuff, and just he's a lot different, and a bigger head sentence, I think, is really, being such a young age has, I think, scared him a bit. He doesn't want to live his life in there, and I think he'll come home and slowly come off the Suboxone and live a normal life, I hope. Yeah.
Hey, just a quick interruption for the all too important PSA. Today's PSA is brought to you by AARC. That's the Alberta Adolescent Recovery Centre, located in Alberta, Canada, where they are treating adolescents with severe SUD. Quite often that means parents are mandating their children into treatment. They're catching this early. They're doing amazing things there. The whole family experiences this treatment program, and I am 100% in support of all the work that they're doing there. If you want to learn more, you can visit their website at arc.ab.ca. And in the meantime, here's a PSA.
Hey, what's up? This is Chad from the Valudation Show. I don't carry a bag around that doesn't have at least one of these or one of these in it. And I carry them because people are dying and dead addicts can't recover. So I don't care how you're finding recovery. I don't care what fellowship you belong to. I don't care if you're using harm reduction. Let's take death out of the equation. Let's stop people from dying. More love, less judge. Peace.
Yeah. Do you want to share with us any of your journey, kind of what the days were like before you went to prison this last time?
Yeah, so obviously he got addicted to ice at 14, and I was just always like, why, how, what have I done wrong as a parent? And I'd just question myself constantly, and it wasn't till the 23rd December 2021 that he come out with my brother had sexually assaulted him for 2 years of his life. And 3 weeks later, he met up with his father, who wasn't really a good role model. And at that time, I was just sort of letting him find his own way, And I said to him, don't drink with your father. Like, just don't drink with him. And one thing led to another. They both, got drunk and punched on, and my son stabbed his father. And so he was in induced coma for a week. And then, we got a 6-year head sentence. We didn't really think it was going to be that bad. But yeah, thinking now, he's just applied for parole. Fingers crossed he gets it. And I just think now, what, a big head sentence is obviously what he needed, I think. Maybe.
That's how old he was when he was charged?
19. Yeah, when he was charged. So, 20 when he was charged. Yeah.
Okay.
So he turned 21 in prison. Yeah. So he's 21 now, nearly 22. Yeah. So just turned 19, 20, sorry, yeah.
That is a lot. That's a lot for everybody there, right? I can hear Mike's brain right now working at like just being the trauma guy, right? I can just where do you even start with this? Mike, do you got any comments you want to make on all of this right now? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds incredibly difficult for you, but obviously for your son, it makes sense. Like kind of the penny dropped when you talked about like the sexual assault stuff. I was like, okay, well, there's the sort of underlying issue that leads to self-medicating, etc. I do, I've been guilty on this show. I've said a lot of times, like I can be quite sort of like single focused, like quite myopic, where I go, oh, it's everything's trauma. And then eventually, as I've been working in this field for 20 plus years. As you start to unravel people's stories, there's usually something back there. It might not be like sort of the sexual assault stuff, but there's always something back there that's adverse experiences that can contribute to it. And I think one of the things that gets lost in that is that him going to prison is also probably quite traumatic for you. This whole experience would be really traumatic for you.
It was awful. It's awful, but I just think now, I've just got to be there for him, and once he gets home, and then he'll find justice once he gets home with the other stuff. Like he was seeking justice, but then that happened, and being in prison, you don't go and make statements and stuff, do you? So wait till he comes home. Yeah.
So much happening there.
Yeah.
I guess we'll kind of do this in tidbits. I do have some more things I want to talk to you about, Kelly, obviously, but we'll loop Tia into the conversation here. Tia, do you kind of want to give a bit of your background, your story, as it were, and go from there?
Basically, I picked up substances at a young age. It was my way of escaping. I was out of home by the time I was 14, and it started with alcohol, just the binge drinking. I picked up marijuana when I was about 12, and that soon became a habit. So I was a chronic marijuana smoker. I would smoke daily. I gave up for a little bit when I had my first children at the age of, I fell pregnant when I was 18. I had my first child when I was 19. And yes, as I always managed to get a little bit of time without any substances. I should probably add, by the time I was 16, I was on speed, acid. It just progressed, My issues with substances progressed, as did my addiction. And yes, as I would manage to get a bit of time up and then pick up again, it was basically a coping mechanism. It's how I coped, that wanting to escape reality and just, I didn't know any other way to deal with things. By the time I was my early 20s, I was married quite young. I was married at 19 after I had my first child. We quickly had 3 children, and after the third child was born, our marriage broke up after he was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, and it kind of tore our, union apart there. And I picked up the drink again. From the drink, I went to heroin, which is something that I thought I would never do, and IV using. And I did that right up until I was about 29, 30, with 3 young children in tow, And then I got on the methadone program to get me off the heroin I was on the methadone for 3.5 years. And I done all right coming off that. I weaned off slowly. I thought I had it, but it wasn't long after, and I picked up methamphetamine. So I had been introduced to the ice, in between the heroin use and probably when I was using speed as a teenager. I just didn't know, and yeah, so my 30s, I kind of thought, well, I won't pick up the heroin again because that was so hard to get off. I'll just use a bit of ice. That won't be so bad. And it's kind of, that was my insanity, always swapping the witch for the bitch. It was, always picking the lesser of the 2 evils. And it wasn't until, I had my youngest 2 children removed from me. I got in a domestic violence situation. We were both using. I had my younger 2 children removed, and I found NA. And that was my saving grace. I then had 12-step meetings to go to numerous times a day. It kept me safe. I was blessed to be in a place where there was multiple meetings daily. At that stage, I was in a women's refuge. You know what? It could have broken me, and it did for the first part, having my children removed. 16 years, I'd been nothing but a mother, you know. Although I'd had my substance abuse issues, I kind of justified myself by saying, well, I'm not the type that palms my kids off. They're all, you know, I'm always there. I've just got to use substances to deal with everyday life, you know. And it wasn't until, that moment that was my rock bottom. And I had to switch it in my mind to think, okay, well, this is a positive. I can actually unstack and unpack some of the stuff that I'd been carrying with me all my life. It was the first time that, with a bit of maturity, I was able to deal with some of the experiences I'd had as a child, things like that. And I will always be grateful to NA for leading the way with that. And it wasn't long after I got my children back. Then he was 11 at the time. It was my 11 and my 2-year-old that were taken. And, you know, it ended up being a positive thing. Like, I wasn't stable. I was obviously, you know, in a bad situation, and my kids deserved better. And ultimately, I deserved better. I just had to realize that. So, yeah, when I got my 11-year-old back, he was taken from me as a sweet, innocent child. And when he came back, he was an angry young man. And he
So if I could
just,
interrupt, were
yeah,
they in
you're right.
foster care or care with family for that time?
So I had one stuck in foster care, and I had one go to his father, the one with the cystic fibrosis. So while he was with his father, my ex-husband was actually using at the time. So obviously it wasn't an ideal situation, and my son started using himself. So by the time I got him back, it was just this explosion of a young man. And I was in shock, you know. He started going out stealing cars, just running amok. And I relapsed. My relapse at that stage was pure punishment, because I wasn't coping with the son, and I felt guilt and shame that, you know, had I not been in the situation that my children were removed from me, then, you know, my son wouldn't be where he is now. So basically, from that moment, that relapse went on for about 12 months before I pulled myself up. And it's been then since I stopped using quite many hard drugs. That again was methamphetamine, which is kind of the backbone for what I do now with the anti-ice campaign. You know, I really feel that, you know, I had an addiction to more, so it didn't matter what substance it was, but the ice was the most destructive to myself, my family, the people
I think
around
that's a
me.
pretty common theme, though, too, Tia. That is, and I mean, I assume I probably shouldn't assume when you say ice, you mean meth, right?
Yeah.
Like that's
Yep.
what it's just okay.
Yeah.
Okay, just making
Methamphetamine.
sure.
Yes.
I assumed as much, but
Yeah.
that's one of those drugs that just took over the whole world, right? Like every civilized or every modern country, and the not so modern countries, the still growing countries are you know, it's taken over. So it's not nothing, that's for sure. It's a very real problem. So I can see why. Yeah, I can see why you say that.
Yeah. 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 So
Mike, you got any
basically,
comments? Oh, sorry.
yeah. Sorry. Do you want?
No, I cut you off.
My son's
No,
been
continue.
out
No,
of
continue. Please do. Yeah. My bad.
my son's been in and out of juvenile detention, and now in jail, which is where he met Kelly's son, which is, you know, quite an interesting story how we met. Our sons were actually cellmates at the time. And my son having cystic fibrosis and being in the correctional system, it's definitely not ideal. And, you know, he's not able to keep up his dietary needs. So it's regular hospitalizations, things like that. And one time he was in hospital and she had to get a hold of me her son said, look, can you please ring my Sally's mum because he's in hospital. And we've kind of befriended each other and been friends and, supported each other ever since. But once I told her kind of my story, she said, oh, come on this group and, you can give the insight for, what you've been through. And, I agreed wholeheartedly. Like, to me, it's a bit of a living amends for what I put my own family through, is the fact that now I can help other families.
Of course, right. And having so much insight into all the different angles, of course, too, right? So,
Yeah.
Mike, what do you got any questions or comments towards Tia?
Is telling my story a little bit, and there's a lot of parallels. I mean, it's not uncommon. Like, this is why support groups are so valuable to people, is that, you stick around long enough, you start to hear parts of your story and other people's stuff. I started really young. The poly drug stuff went from one to another. I drew lines in the sand and said, I'll never do that. And then ended up doing that. I'll never do that. I ended up doing it. Alcohol, cannabis, psychedelics, cocaine, heroin by 19. That became my favorite. Lots of attempts to get clean, relapses, multiple treatment episodes. Lots of that, like, sort of rationalizing and minimizing stuff. Oh, I won't use this drug, and I will only use that one, or I won't use it in this way, or I'll only use with people. I won't use alone. Oh, I'll only use alone. I won't use with people. I changed girlfriends and schools and towns and jobs, and I just, my addiction kept going with me wherever I went, right? And you had said that you got to unpack some of the stuff from your childhood. So then, like, there's the trauma stuff, the adverse childhood experiences. And in some ways I can relate to you and your story, but I also think, like, in some ways I'm like your son as well. My dad was an alcoholic at a young age. I started coping with things through using. I just there's a lot in your story that I could quite relate to, the coping mechanism stuff, and you would know from sitting in recovery rooms, people say things like, one of the big ones, so I'm from Canada, in that area, a lot of people would say things like, I just didn't feel comfortable in my own skin. And like, why wouldn't a young person feel comfortable in their skin? Like, that isn't for nothing. Like, that's a trauma thing to me. So, like, a lot, and people nod a lot when they go, oh yeah, me too, I get that too. And it's like, there's the thread of trauma through the whole thing. Is like, why did we take it upon ourselves to have to medicate, to use substances to cope, right? Is because something wasn't okay, right? And I'm not blaming parents or throwing parents, it just is what it is. A lot of our parents did the very best job that they could with what they had, and somehow my needs weren't getting met. And that's just what it was. Now, my mom, still to today, so I started using at 12, got clean at 32. I'm 54 in like a couple of months, and I'm over 20 years clean. And my mom still till today blames herself for my addiction. So she's got the guilt, she's got the remorse, she's got all of that stuff. Meanwhile, I put her on a pedestal like she's my hero. Anyway, there's just a lot of stuff in there that it brought up for me around not just like relating to you as someone who used, but relating to your son in some ways. I ended up in jail and, all that stuff. So, thank you for sharing that. Both of you, actually, thanks for sharing your stories. I don't know what it's like to be a parent, and I can only imagine what it's like to be the parent of someone who is incarcerated, who's in addiction. That powerless feeling and fear and anxiety must just be so hard for you guys.
Yeah, right. It's one of those things that I think is impossible to relate to. Like you said, Mike, we can try and empathize as best we can, but I'm not a parent either. So, well, certainly. So for people that aren't familiar with the platform, a ton of our content has been directed to families. And I want to talk more about this because that's the group you guys are, your group. So we'll turn it back to the family thing now that we've kind of got some background about each other out of this. One of the things that I talk about quite often is how the trauma, the shame, all of those things that affect the person who's suffering an addiction, affect your loved one, affect you in a very real way. In a way that's no less real, I would say, right? They're different because they've got different nuances, but the effect that they have, and it's something that we've talked with Mike quite about when we start talking about trauma, the effect that those things have on you, on your body and on your mind, right? that's just as real too, right? Like if you're in this constant state of, where's my son going to be tomorrow? Is he going to be alive? Is he going to, is he going to end up in, that's a survival mode, most certainly, right? And I'll let Mike kind of speak to that, how that works somatically within the body. Mike, if you want to talk about that and that trauma and how the parallels between them, if you, in a more less bastardized way than I would. Yeah.
Kind of without going into too much of like a neuroscience lecture, when we're stressed, so trauma is traumatic stress, like I'm experiencing something, puts me in that fight or flight, amygdala activation, cortisol, adrenaline, heart rate, blood pressure, all of this stuff's going up. It's stopping digestion. It's stopping all kinds of systems that aren't, this is survival mode stuff. And when I'm in that for a long period of time, it has effects on my immune system. Obviously, my nervous system is all jacked up. I get sleep disturbances, like this, anxieties, all that kind of stuff. And it just has real physical toll on us. And I think that I didn't understand that, obviously, when I was using. And I lived in a different town than my mother did. And the last time that I went to treatment, there was a place that was very kind of hardcore 12-step place. You don't get to have any contact with people until you're done a step 5. So it was about 35 days until they'd let you have any contact with anyone. And I talked to my mom at that point, and she said, this is the first time in 10 years I can actually sleep at night, which I had no idea she was experiencing, because I always thought out of sight, out of mind, which also speaks to a lack of resources for families a lot, because I've talked to families a lot and they go, it's not my problem, it's his problem. And then treatment providers look at it that way too. And it's like, oh, well, Tia and Kelly, your parents, but it's not your problem, it's your son's problems. But that's absolutely not true. If you have a son in addiction, you have a big fucking problem, pardon my language, right? And I think
I don't feel like you have to say ever pardon your language to an Australian. They're very foul people, from what I can tell.
No,
right?
we're good.
I have had so many Australian clients. I'm doing it more because we're on a podcast and because I'm like representing the treatment center than about like offending anyone in the room. But yeah, but I just think it impacts everyone. And then I guess the flip side of that, the bright side of that, is that when people enter into recovery, it has the same knock-on effect on, untold amount of people around you that benefit from you getting clean as well. But
I'll speak to that specific point, Mike. It's something I've said more than a couple times on the show. So when I'm out using, my mom is stressed, right? Like, obviously, I don't have to unpack that at all. But when I get sober, everyone's proud of me. So I'm on this wave, and we all know, we've heard about it or experienced it ourselves, right? This kind of euphoria of being in recovery and everything's going to be fucking great. But my mom is still concerned, right? She won't outwardly portray that to me. She'll be happy for me. She'll be encouraging. She'll do all the things you want this wonderful parent to do, or that you need this wonderful parent to do, but the whole time suppressing this fear, this absolute fear about what happens if, right? And then I go out, and she goes back to that place where she can be openly fucking worried and stressed. But me, I'm doing what I love, what I've always done with feelings I don't want to feel. And I get to numb those feelings. And she doesn't get that. She doesn't have that luxury of whatever substance numbing her out to it. And so she goes through this cycle where at least I break from it when I'm in recovery, and I break from it when I'm using. And she goes she's just on the ride the whole damn time. And over time, that'll mitigate, right? Like, given, as the time starts to pile up. But I'll tell you right now, if I didn't answer the phone for 2 or 3 days when my mom was trying to get in touch with me, where her brain's going, right? Like, I experienced that the day before I left for Thailand here, actually, when my phone I went to go visit a couple friends, my phone died. I wasn't really worried about it. And mom couldn't get a hold of me for a day and a half. Lisa, my other co-host, Dr. Lisa, tried to call me 25 times when my phone was off. Right? So everyone's stressed out. I'm like, what's going on? I turn my phone on, and it never goes away for the people that love you, right? Not completely, I don't think, anyway, right? Maybe, no, Mike, your mom at 21 and some odd years later, right, is is to a point now where if you didn't answer the phone for a couple of days, but even then,
I don't know. When I was still living in Canada, at 8 years clean, I was having a conversation with my mom, and she asked me, "How are you doing?" And I said, "Oh my God, it's like, I was just going through some stuff." And she was like, "But you're okay, right?" Like, and we knew what that unspoken question was, which is like, "But you're not going to go use drugs." And that was at 8 years clean. So, you could ask her at 20 plus years, like, has that been alleviated? Maybe to a certain degree, but I think her biggest fear underlying everything isn't that I'm going to get hit by a car. It's that something will happen that will lead me back to using drugs because, you're right. My mother suffered a lot of the consequences of my using, and I got relief from those consequences by using, right? Like, she got financial consequences, she had emotional consequences, and I got to sort of numb myself to all of that stuff. And she didn't get to do that. She was just kind of like, what do they say? Like, just kind of raw dog in life, like she didn't have any buffer for that. Yeah, I don't know if she ever gets full relief from that. And we have two mothers in the room that could probably let us know, like, what that's like. You can imagine.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Well, we said at the beginning of the episode, and I'll ask you both, with a bit more of your history on the table, because your sons are in jail, is it a comfort to you right now? Somewhat of a comfort to you?
No, the drug use is horrendous in there. It's terrible.
I guess so. Okay,
it's really, really bad.
Yeah, that. It's the thing, and I often speak up about the justice system here in Australia. There's no recovery in jail. We are punitive punishment. And so even, some of the guards that I've spoken to tell me the jails are set up as a human containment facility. They're not set up for rehabilitation. So they don't have access to courses or anything to help them reintegrate back into society. We run a revolving door system here. And it's really quite sad. That's why the rates of recidivism are so high. And it's quite sad, And then what they've been doing is putting everyone on that has substance abuse issues. They put them on the Suboxone program.
Yep.
So we have people going in with an ice habit or an ice addict going in
habit.
And they come out with an opioid addiction.
Yep, definitely.
Really?
I don't see how that is harm minimalisation
exactly
at all. Instead of putting the therapeutic practices in place where we can increase the mental health action within the jails. I mean, the way that the jails here deal with prisoners that are suffering from mental health issues, and we have a lot. I mean, our jails are full of a lot of people that have mental health issues because the system out here in community is not good enough. And people fall between the gaps and they end up being placed in a jail. And then when they have the mental health issues in the jail, they are thrown into isolation, which is not proactive for any kind of mental health illness. And so it's my son's dual diagnosis, yes. So we have the addiction issues. We also have the mental health issues. And, when he was younger and he was running around stealing the cars, et cetera, yes, to answer that first original question, I did feel at ease somewhat that he was being locked up in the juvenile detention centre. But in that juvenile detention centre, he went through sexual abuse. So, the people that I trusted to keep him in somewhat a safe space ended up abusing that. And so then it just impacted on his own traumas. And yeah, we have this situation with my son where he's very much institutionalized. He's never out for a great amount of time. And when he does get out, he hits the ice again. He gets off the program, he hits the ice, he stops taking his mental health medication. And it's only and I'm speaking, I think the longest he has been out for since the age of 12 in total of a band of time would be around 4 months. And most of that he was on the run. So, this is the justice system in Australia. It's not, especially when dealing with youth crimes. we are just creating career criminals. And there's nothing for rehabilitation, reintegration. It's devastating.
No.
Nice, eh? Kelly, you were going to say something as well?
So, yeah, I totally agree with what Tia's saying. So my son went in semi-clean, never used opiates and got an opiate addiction in there, and now is on the Suboxone program.
It's
And
almost unreal to, like, it's almost like, no, that can't be real. It's hard
It's
to
insane.
believe that you're actually
it's
saying
crazy.
the things that you're saying right
and
now.
I spoke to a First Nations liaison officer in there, and I said, like, is it really this bad? Like, what I'm hearing and seeing? And she said, 15 years ago, men would come in here to get clean. She goes, they're leaving here with addictions now, and that's off the record. And that's what she said to me, like someone that works at the prison. And not just the addiction, like the suicide rate in there is horrendous. Like I know one lady who's lost her son to suicide last year in there, and another lady who lost her son in there last year as well. So it's just, I don't know. At the start, I used to think, when he first went in, I don't have to worry about him. But then this last time, it was just a whole new ball game. It was,
Wow.
no.
It's almost like if I wanted to design a system to harm a population, it would be that system. It's insane that someone who's not opiate or opioid dependent would be given Suboxone. Like, I don't understand the rationale. Do they give you a rationale behind that? Or is it just to
Well, I think they get
protect
addicted
people
to
from
it.
fentanyl?
I think they
The
just get into it.
rationale that I get, I actually had a conversation with our local drugs and alcohol person here in town now 2 days ago. And what he said to me, the reasoning behind it is that it is so rampant. They do the Suboxone strips under the table in the jails. So their fear is they're going to be addicted to that anyway. So why not put them on the program? So that's their way of the harm minimalisation, But yeah, to me, it was absurd for someone that had come off a methadone program because I had an opioid addiction. I could not get that rationally in my mind, how my son can have an ice addiction and then be on the Suboxone program. It was just crazy to me, you know. It's
As
like
someone,
it's harm minimalisation gone crazy, you know.
well, to me, again,
And I
it
think
sounds quite harmful.
the big turnaround here, I think in our country at least, is they privatised majority of the jails. So then keeping people in jail became a business.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're body brokering at that point. Yeah, it sounds insane to me. As someone who had an opiate dependence for years and years and years, who's worked in the treatment industry or what field, whatever you want to call it, I've done a big part of my job was like drug testing people who are like healthcare workers and like all kinds of people in safety sensitive jobs, working with addictions medicine specialists and occupational health medicine specialists. I can't come up with a rationale. I actually helped train for the BC College of Physicians and Surgeons doctors in their methadone program. And we had a role play where one of the doctors, I got to play an addict, which was funny because it wasn't much of a stretch for me as not being an actor. But I had tested positive for cocaine was the sort of role play. And to go see this doctor, I was also on methadone. That was part of the background of this role play. And I had talked to that doctor into upping my dose of methadone. And this is in front of all of the doctors in this program and everything. And that guy just got absolutely torn apart by the people running the program because it didn't make sense that someone with a positive for a stimulant would all of a sudden be getting an upped dose of methadone. And that's what you're telling me the whole prison system down there is doing, which is, it doesn't make sense. It just does not make sense.
I want to believe that's the prisoners lying to get it. I want to believe that, right?
I think the only rationale where it would make sense
maybe that's
to me
naive on my point.
Maybe if there was a fentanyl problem and they feel like it might help reduce overdose if someone's already got like an antagonist or an agonist. But I'm not sure. Like I just don't.
But even
understand.
That's a bit crazy.
I think it's quite
it is
rampant
crazy.
in there. It's quite rampant in there. even when they're not on the program. You know, people get it in there, and then it's a big money maker, and then it goes from one thing to another when they need to be on the program because, you know, parents aren't giving out money or family members aren't giving them money, and then they're getting in debt, and it's bad. Yeah.
That just adds one more
host of
element of like something to be
right.
afraid of when your sons are going in there. And
Yeah.
the whole fact that that there are no programs, like there's no recovery in there or anything. No wonder the recidivism rates are so high. And I mean, it must leave you feeling like, at times at least, losing hope for like the society and what we're doing for your sons, you know, what Australia is doing for your sons. It must just be like,
Yeah. 100%.
these are just kids that are in pain and hurting and need some help, and they're just getting,
Yes.
and don't get me wrong, I'm not giving people a pass on like bad behavior and all of that, like, you know, pay your debt to society or whatever however you want to word it. But like, you know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, or whatever they say, right? Like, help them get clean so they come out and they don't go back in the system over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's
Which is
designed for recidivism.
Yes.
Yes.
And ultimately that's, you know, that's what my kind of stance is. If there's more focus on rehabilitation, then community is going to get the benefit of that at the end of the day, because you're going to cut that recidivism and that coming out and reoffending, because, you know, we're going more a holistic approach. Yeah.
And
I don't know.
ironically, just I think 2 episodes ago, I released a reel with Dr. Lisa, my co-host, talking about a study that has been repeated time and time again in America, Europe, and Australia. Was one of the countries that's been involved, where it's shown absolutely that if every dollar that goes into treatment, the system in its entirety, police, judicial, healthcare, save low end $6, high end $10. So it's an insane savings to be made by investing into treatment.
Yes.
And so to see the absolute opposite, it's just like none of this makes any sense.
Well, it's almost like they don't care about people in addiction or in jail, which I mean, I don't think that's a big stretch, right?
No.
Yeah, no, not at all.
That's crazy. So let's get back to the group. I think you're what, 1,200 members strong now, something like that.
I think we're getting up there now. I'm thinking we're going to hit the 2,000. You know, well, not hopefully,
well, and growth compounds growth, right? So it'll keep. Oh yeah, now that you've cracked that 1,000, you know, mark.
Yeah.
The second 1,000 will come a lot faster, and the third 1,000 will come a lot faster than that, right?
Yep. Which is, you know, it's sad, but it's good.
Sad, good. But it's good people have somewhere to come and, you know, speak to. And
it's sad that it's needed, but it's very good that it's there. So it's something that completely made up numbers. So I'm not spitting a statistic here. I'm just to put things in perspective. For every person who's suffering an addiction, I think it's easy to agree that we can say 10 people are affected by it.
Minimal.
Easily, right?
Way
minimum,
more,
right? So it's an arbitrary number. But, and then if you look at the resources that are available, 90% of the resources go to people with SUD. Maybe 10% of the resources go to their loved ones. So it's a complete flip-flop. You've got 90% of the resources going towards 10%, and then 10% of the resources going to the 90%. So groups like yours are absolutely, I think, one of the more important kind of social groups that could be on social media, right? Because there's not much for people to turn to. There just is not.
No,
right?
It's not. And just as someone that's got an addiction themselves, suffers that shame, guilt, and etc., you can imagine like the family members that don't understand that shame that feel around that, to actually go and speak to people and reach out and get help themselves. One thing I encourage family members is to always get some counselling for themselves, because there are so many emotions that we're dealing with. And when I explain trauma to them, it's, people have different experiences, and trauma is a physical and psychological reaction to different experiences. So what might be trauma for one person is just an event for another, because sometimes families, when you say, well, it comes from trauma, they tend to blame themselves and take that internally, but when
or
you
think
can
you're blaming.
Yes, yes. So when you can kind of unpack trauma a bit like that to them, well, it's, okay, it's not all their fault, which, most of the time
Trauma
it's not.
isn't, it's
Not
not
at
what
all.
happened, it's what you're left with,
Yes,
right? And
yes,
so I always
exactly.
use as an example, my parents split up when I was young, and um, I was pretty good at sports, and I playing footy, so like soccer for us Canadians, and I'd score a goal, and I would look over onto the sidelines, and like everyone else's dad was there, and my dad wasn't there, and I started forming beliefs about myself, and people might say to me like, Mike, that's almost 50 years ago. Like, get over it. Like, that's not traumatic. That's just, but that instance, like you say, wouldn't necessarily be traumatic to everyone. It could be an event. But what I was
Yes,
left with from that was a lack of confidence, feeling not loved, I'm not good enough, I'm not important,
yes,
and all of that stuff. That's the trauma. Like the
yes,
legacy of that day is that I didn't believe in myself and that people would want to be in relationships with me. And then that impacted all of my relationships moving forward, including work relationships, romantic relationships, like all kinds of stuff, friends. I always thought like people were being almost like charitable by being friends with me or in a relationship with me because I didn't deserve that. And it comes directly from little instances like that. And people don't understand. It isn't all the like war zone sexual abuse, that kind of stuff. It's like these little things. And that's no one's fault. My mom and my dad split up because my dad was an alcoholic and my mom made the best decision for us. And she wasn't at my game because she was out earning a living to put a roof over my head, etc. As an adult, I understand that. As a kid, all I knew
yes,
was that no one was there. Right?
yes. 100%. Yep.
One of the things that my stay at the Yatra Centre, of course, we won't get into the specifics because we don't have the time and nor is this maybe the space for it, but some of those core beliefs and things like Mike was just talking about. When I went to Yatra, I thought I was there for all that crazy big T trauma, violence, and things that had happened. And I've got some stories. Let me tell you, I got some stories. And that's why I was there. But what I came to find out after experiencing trauma therapy was so many of those core beliefs that had affected me from my entire life had come from seemingly just, I'm not sure what the word I'm looking for here is, just seemingly random kind
Innocuous.
of, innocuous, that's the word, thank you, yeah. Innocuous things that had happened when I was young. And again, like you say, Mike, I can look back and go, as a grown-ass man now, I can look back and go, oh, yeah, mom, whatever. Of course she was doing that because of this. Like, think about it, man. But as an 11-year-old boy, that's not what you're thinking, right?
Well,
Like,
in that stage
you're
of
an 11-year-old boy, you don't understand that.
in that stage of development, you see the world through the lens of it's all about me because you don't understand adult relationships and nuances and context and stuff. It's just like, oh, this thing happened and it's about my experience of it, right?
Of course. And to kind of switch gears on you here. So I've been a part of other family member groups since the onset of this show, because again, like right from inception, the show has a lot of its content has been geared towards family members. One of the things, and to be fair, I didn't scroll through months or even weeks, but like, I scroll through quite a bit anyway, maybe a couple of weeks worth of posts in the group. One of the things I did not see was the feeding frenzy, I call it. So, and maybe I'm sure it has to be there because of the nature of the group. I'm sure that it is. So, and what I mean by that is often in some of the groups that I go on to, I see my son is this, my husband's that, my wife, my daughter, whatever. And the kind of gut knee-jerk reaction is leave right now, get out of there, kick them out, do that, like this kind of.
I think we're pretty
separate yourself. Sorry.
Oh,
We do have, sometimes we get a bit of that, don't we?
yeah, we
some
do, but
people
we
are,
pretty pull.
but we try and really explain that acceptance is so important, I guess it's, I try and take my program into whatever I do. And, what I'm taught is, acceptance brings the inner peace, and if we can accept where someone's at, they're still our children, they're still our loved one, we're always going to love them. Yes, there's certain boundaries that we need to put in place to protect, maybe we've got younger children or whatever, to protect ourselves. Yeah. But ultimately what I try and impress is that, it's whoever's got the substance abuse issues, it's their journey. And we can plant these seeds, of information where they can get themselves help when they're ready to get that help. and, you know, hope that that garden kind of grows. I think those seeds are so, so important. But to be there and do it with love.
That shows the
know?
importance of the admin's knowledge and experience in any given group, right? Because you can kind of steer that content that to somewhat anyway. But we are getting close to the top of the hour, and I would be remiss if I didn't, Mike. You've spoken quite a bit on the show about the trauma faced by parents specifically, and how important it is for them to kind of address their own mental health and things going on in their life. Could I get you to go on a bit of a tangent about that before we kind of, you know, move towards the end of the show?
No, I think that covers it. I think it obviously, as I said earlier, like it impacts the family members as much or maybe even more than it affects the person in addiction sometimes, because they don't get a reprieve from it at any given time. And I think that a lot of times when we reach out to people, probably some of the stuff that you're talking about, the feeding frenzy, if we reach out to people who don't understand it, we get that like cut them loose, kick them out, and as evidenced by your guys' stories today about the use in jail, you can't punish someone enough to make them not want to use drugs anymore. Like that doesn't, exactly. It's not a viable way. The war on drugs was lost forever. It's useless. So, doing that stuff. But when we get that kind of feedback, it's like, as a parent or a family member, I would imagine it's like, well, that's useless feedback, telling me to kick him out. I'm not going to do that. Now I don't want to come to you, my source of support, and talk about what's going on anymore, because you're just going to tell me more stuff that is not helpful to me, that I'm not going to take those sort of that advice into action. So what I need is someone that can actually support me where I'm at, and help me to move forward in a way where it's like, I'm not willing to cut those ties. I'm, like my experience with my mother, she drew a boundary. She didn't, cut me off or anything like that. What she said was, with love, I'm not supporting your addiction anymore, but I'll support everything to do with recovery. I love you. And she was told every dollar she gave me was another dollar that I would use, and that she was loving me to death and all of that stuff. And she basically just said, I'm not doing it anymore. I cannot do it anymore. And I was at a public speaking engagement one time, and she was in the crowd. And I said, I think you can probably ask her. That was the most difficult thing she ever said, because she didn't know what was going to happen. And she was nodding her head in the crowd. But what happened was 4 days later, I was in treatment, because I knew she would support anything to move forward, but she wouldn't support anything I wanted to use. And she was powerless about that. She couldn't, I was 32 years old. She couldn't control what I was going to do. She could only control what she was going to do. And what she was going to do was going to love me and support me in healthy stuff, and just opt out of supporting unhealthy stuff. And I know that would be terrifying. I'm sure she would have, breathed for me if that's what I asked her to do. That's the level of sort of what she was willing to do to kind of help me. And really all she could do was love me. And I think that she did. I don't know where she got it, but she got some good advice from someone that space of, I'm not kicking him out, I'm not punishing him, like he's already hurt. And I think it speaks to that treatment thing where people say we need to break him down and build him back up. And it's like, well, we're already broken down. Like, I don't need to be broken down further. And my mom was like, I'll help to build him up, but I'm not helping with the breaking down stuff anymore. So I don't know if that's the rant you're looking for, Chris.
No, absolutely.
That's the one I got.
Absolutely it is. Chad Valier is a good friend of mine in Canada here, who's another content creator. He just made a reel the other day saying, I will do anything to help you get better and nothing to help you get sicker. Right. And it was like, that's it right there.
You actually had something a while ago, and I'm going to paraphrase it. I'll get it wrong a bit, but it was something like, nobody has ever regretted not loving someone enough. It was about if you have a loved one in addiction who you do the tough love thing, and then they can go out and they can pass away, and then you're full of regret, like, why didn't I do this? But I think your take on it, Chris, was like the opposite, is like, I'll never regret not loving him. And I can't remember, maybe you remember that.
I say so many wise things, it's hard to keep track, really. They come out so fast.
What I'm hearing is he stole it from someone and he doesn't remember.
There's a very good chance of that. Change one word if I'm not feeling lazy. But no, one of the things I am prone to saying is that people thrive in spite of tough love, not because of it.
Yes.
Being tough on somebody is never going to improve their situation, right?
No.
It may not make it worse, but they get better in spite of that, not because of it.
There's
and
tons
I
of
think that's a
evidence.
narrative. That's a narrative that is rampant in the recovery communities. It's rampant. It's everywhere, right?
Well, if you look at like old school traditional sort of addiction treatment, a lot of it is shaming and blaming, and the success rates of that are like terribly low.
Yeah.
But when you actually have a more trauma-informed, caring, compassionate way where it's like, I understand, like, you're not a bad person. You just have behaviors that are maladaptive coping behaviors because of this stuff. Like, let's try to understand you and support you into changing those behaviors. You just get a better chance of someone feeling cared for and loved, and that there's enough support for them to get well, instead of saying like, fuck this, I'm going to use.
Of course.
Yeah, 100%. So
Right.
I think what Kelly and I try to do is really put that education out there for families, so that they can gain that better understanding and then support their loved one better.
Yeah, definitely.
And the parents in Australia are lucky you guys are doing that. Now, about that group, can people join from anywhere,
Yeah.
or do you kind of just like to focus on
anywhere.
the Australian
I think
component?
anywhere.
Anyone can join.
Yeah.
Anywhere? Okay. Great. So anybody that's listening, the link, of course, will be in the show notes. And I think they're incredible groups like that. We should have more of them. They should be bigger, and specifically, they should be run by people like yourselves with a bit more compassion in them than maybe some of the other groups out there, right?
Think about
actually that.
Sorry,
I made that meme. People inspire in spite of tough love, not because of it.
Yeah.
And I was kicked out of 2 separate family groups for it.
Oh,
Two.
okay.
Well, it's the old school way to look at it.
Yeah,
It's the old school way to look at it, and I think it's with what you have as parents living your lives, as far as like resources available, and that you have created this thing. Like, to think that governments can't do this is insane. Like, that they can't like look at what actually
do
works.
A whole lot better.
Yeah, you would think, but again, it's like they don't care.
Yeah. No,
Seemingly.
it's crazy.
Seemingly.
With the Anti-Ice campaign, we've been trying to get government funding for the last 12 years, and we're still a non-funded charity.
Insane.
And
We'll get Dr. Lisa to find one of those studies for you that were done in Australia about the effectiveness of.
I wonder what the salaries
prevention.
are of all the guys in suits sitting around at their like catered lunch discussing whether or not they should give you some funding.
Yeah.
What?
Ooh,
Sorry,
right.
that's my anti-capitalist, leaning left, bleeding heart, liberal
an episode
therapist.
if you didn't give.
It's
I'm a
true,
Didn't
though.
come up with some of it.
I'm a therapist. That's what I do.
You can't fight the establishment.
No.
That's the thing.
Fight it from the inside. Smuggle your values in.
Yes. Infiltrate.
Anyway, that we are at the top of the hour, so that does bring us to my favorite part of the show, and that is the daily gratitude. Today's daily gratitudes are brought to you by FAR. That's Families for Addiction Recovery. They're doing some really great things in Canada, helping families with loved ones who suffer with SUD. You can learn more about them at farcanada.org. And in the meantime, here's your daily gratitudes. And let's stick with the order we had. Kelly, what are you grateful for today?
I'm just grateful to sort of rid this journey with my son to, not be like, they're just an addict, they're someone that does need help and does need love and does need support. And I'm glad that we can help other people that are on the same journey as us.
It's a great gratitude. Tia, what are you grateful for today?
I'm grateful for the gifts of recovery, being alive today to share my story. All those bad choices and coping mechanisms give me the best tools to be able to help others. So I'm grateful for that.
Great. That's great. Mike, what about yourself? What are you grateful for?
I'm grateful that all of you people are using these platforms to try to help others. And I'm really struck by...
You people?
Well, you 3 people here with me. Yeah, you people. You people. You awesome people doing the good stuff that you're doing. Keep it up. No, I'm grateful that that you guys are doing what you're doing. I'm really struck by the gratitude I have for my mom and how she was the catalyst for my recovery and has, much to her detriment at times, never stopped supporting me. And, you know, I've had lots of people along the way that have done that. So, but my mom is the big one. And I say that because it's always the mom stories that get me because of my mom. So I want to, yeah.
Big love to your mum.
100%.
Big love.
I'll let her know. And big love back to you guys and to your sons.
Thank you.
Yeah, no kidding. Eh?
Yeah, there's hope. It can get better, right?
Yes,
I'm going to echo
100%.
you. Actually, it's been a while since I've sent out a specific thanks to Mom, some gratitude to her. As Mike is more than aware of, and you guys wouldn't know, but she has everything to do with what goes on in the show, how we exit the show with the "You Are Loved" message. Daily gratitudes themselves are as a direct result of my mom. My healing journey in Thailand was only made possible because of her. There's like so much that I have to be thankful to that woman for. So I'm very grateful to her. I'm also grateful to every single person who continues to like, comment, share, interact with, talk about anything to do with our platform. It's growing all the time and it's growing really fast. I'm very thankful for that because every time you do these things, you're keeping me living my best life. My best life is to continue making a humble living, spreading the message. And the message is this. If you're in active addiction right now, today could be the day. Today could be the day that you start a lifelong journey. Reach out to a friend, reach out to a family member, call into detox, pray, go to church. I don't care. Do whatever it is you got to do to get that journey started because it is so much better than the alternative. And if you have a loved one who's suffering an addiction right now, you're just taking the time to listen to this rather amazing episode. You just take one more minute out of your day and text that person. Let them know they are loved. Use the words.
You are loved.
You are loved.
You are loved.
That little glimmer of hope just might be the thing that brings them back.